Justice served.
What would you do if you discovered your boss was stealing millions of dollars? Would you stay silent to keep your job? Would you look the other way? I didn't, and it cost me everything until it didn't. My name is Jessica Hartwell, and 2 years ago, I was the senior financial analyst at Meridian Pharmaceuticals, a company worth $12 billion. I loved my job. I believed in the mission, and I trusted my boss completely. That trust almost destroyed my career, because when I discovered what she was doing, the fraud, the embezzlement, the lies, she didn't just fire me, she tried to frame me for her crimes. But here's the thing about people who think they're untouchable. They get sloppy. And I'm very, very good at finding evidence. This is the story of how my boss tried to bury me and how I made sure she went down instead.
Let me take you back to where it all started. 3 years ago, when I thought I'd found my dream job. I was 29 years old, fresh off getting my CPA certification and wrapping up my MBA in finance from UCLA. Meridian Pharmaceuticals recruited me hard. They were a mid-sized company that specialized in developing treatments for rare diseases, the kind of work that actually mattered, that saved lives. During my final interview, I met Victoria Ashford, the chief financial officer. She was 46, impeccably dressed in designer suits with perfectly styled auburn hair and this commanding presence that filled every room she entered. She'd been with Meridian for 8 years and had a reputation as a financial genius who'd helped take the company public. "Jessica," she said, looking over my resume with approval, "you have exactly the kind of analytical mind we need. Meridian is growing fast, and we need someone who can keep up. Someone detail-oriented. Someone I can trust." Trust. That word would come back to haunt me. She offered me the position of senior financial analyst, reporting directly to her. The salary was incredible, $145,000 plus bonuses. I'd be working on quarterly reports, investor presentations, and high-level financial strategy. I accepted on the spot. The first year was amazing. Victoria was demanding but fair, pushing me to excel while teaching me the intricacies of pharmaceutical finance. She mentored me, invited me to executive meetings, and made me feel like I was part of something important. "You remind me of myself at your age. Hungry, brilliant, willing to do what it takes to succeed." I was flattered. Victoria Ashford was everything I aspired to be. Powerful, respected, successful. She'd broken through the glass ceiling in a male-dominated industry and made it look effortless. My team was small but efficient. There was me, 2 junior analysts named David and Priya, and we reported to Victoria with occasional oversight from the CEO, Robert Chen. Robert was a scientist turned executive, more comfortable in a lab than a boardroom, which meant he largely trusted Victoria to handle all financial matters. That trust was his biggest mistake. Everything seemed perfect. The company was thriving, our stock price was climbing, and I was being groomed for a promotion to finance director. I was living the dream. Until the day I noticed something odd in the expense reports. It started innocently enough. I was preparing materials for our Q3 investor presentation, cross-referencing departmental budgets against actual expenditures. Standard work, the kind of thing I'd done hundreds of times. But this time, something didn't add up. The research and development department showed consulting fees of $847,000 for a company called Nexus Advisory Solutions. The amount was significant, but not crazy for pharmaceutical R&D. What bothered me was that I'd never seen this vendor in our previous quarters. I pulled up our vendor database. Nexus Advisory Solutions had been added 7 months ago, approved by Victoria personally. The company provided strategic consulting services for drug development initiatives. Curious, I dug deeper. The invoices were vague, like consulting services rendered for Project Aurora or advisory support for compound development. No detailed breakdowns, no itemized hours, just flat fees ranging from $50,000 to $150,000 per month. Something felt wrong. I did what any good analyst would do. I Googled Nexus Advisory Solutions. And that's when things got weird. The company had a website, but it was bare bones, just a landing page with generic corporate speak about innovative solutions and strategic partnerships. No team bios, no case studies, no real information. The business address listed was a registered agent service in Delaware, a red flag for shell companies. I checked LinkedIn. No employees listed as working for Nexus Advisory Solutions. No company page. Nothing. My stomach tightened. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. This was systematic fraud. And then I found the smoking gun.
I was scrolling through Delaware's Secretary of State business filings late one night. Yes, I'm that kind of person. When I found it. Nexus Advisory Solutions, LLC. Registered agent, Corporate Services, Inc. And listed as the company's registered member, Victoria M. Ashford. My mentor, my boss, the CFO of a $12 billion company. She owned the shell company. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I immediately checked the other suspicious vendors. Different registered agents, different structures, but careful cross-referencing of filing dates, addresses, and patterns revealed the truth. Victoria owned or controlled at least 6 of the shell companies. The others were harder to trace, but the pattern was clear. She'd been embezzling from Meridian Pharmaceuticals for at least 15 months, possibly longer, creating fake consulting companies, approving their invoices herself, and funneling millions of dollars into her own accounts. This was the kind of fraud that led to federal prison time. I spent the entire weekend documenting everything. I created spreadsheets tracking every payment, saved copies of incorporation documents, screenshotted vendor profiles, and built a timeline showing when each shell company was created and when payments began. By Sunday night, I had a 47-page report with irrefutable evidence. Now I had to decide what to do with it. The smart move, the safe move, would have been to go directly to the CEO or the board's audit committee. But I was naive. I still believed in the system. I still believed that if I brought my concerns to Victoria, there might be an explanation I'd missed. Maybe I wanted her to tell me I was wrong. Maybe I wanted my mentor back. On Monday morning, I requested a private meeting with Victoria. I need to discuss some irregularities I found in our vendor payments, I told her assistant. Victoria's response came within minutes. My office, 4 p.m., close the door when you come in. Those 6 hours of waiting were torture. I kept second-guessing myself. What if I was wrong? What if there was a legitimate explanation? What if I was about to destroy my career over a misunderstanding? But the numbers didn't lie. The shell companies were real. Victoria's name was on those documents. At 4 p.m. exactly, I walked into her office carrying a folder with copies of my findings. Victoria was behind her massive desk, perfectly composed as always. "Jessica," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "what's this about vendor irregularities?" I sat down and opened my folder. I've been reviewing our consulting expenses, and I found some vendors that concern me. Nexus Advisory Solutions, Pinnacle Research Group, and several others. The payments are substantial, but the companies don't seem to have any real presence or employees. Victoria's expression didn't change. "Go on." I checked their incorporation documents. I slid a page across her desk. Nexus Advisory Solutions is registered to you personally, and the payment patterns suggest several other vendors might be connected to you as well. Silence. Victoria stared at the document, her face still perfectly calm.
Then she looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw the real person behind the polished exterior. She wasn't afraid. She was calculating. Jessica, I'm going to give you a chance that I wouldn't give most people. A chance I'm offering because I've mentored you and because I see potential in you. She leaned forward. What you've stumbled onto is a sophisticated tax optimization strategy approved by our external counsel. Those entities are legitimate consulting firms that I have partial ownership in, yes, but they provide real services. The reason they're not publicly visible is for competitive advantage. We don't want our competitors knowing who we're working with. It was smooth, plausible, the kind of lie that someone with less experience might believe. I'd like to see the work product these firms delivered. The reports, the analysis, the deliverables that justified $12.7 million in payments? Victoria's jaw tightened. That material is confidential and above your clearance level. I'm the senior financial analyst. My job is to review these expenditures. Your job, Victoria said, her voice turning cold, is to do what I tell you to do. And right now, I'm telling you to drop this. Consider it a direct order. I can't do that. The mask dropped completely. Victoria's eyes went hard as stone. Then you're making a very serious mistake, Jessica. The kind of mistake that ends careers. Are you absolutely certain you want to go down this path? I thought about my apartment lease, my student loans, my mother's medical bills that I helped with. I thought about everything I'd worked for, everything this job meant to me. Then I thought about $12.7 million stolen from a company trying to develop life-saving drugs. I'm certain, I said. Victoria nodded slowly. Then this meeting is over. You're dismissed. I walked out of her office, knowing I'd just declared war on someone far more powerful than me. I had no idea how brutal that war would become.
The next morning, I arrived at work to find my computer access had been revoked. There's been a security incident, IT told me. We're investigating. Victoria's orders. My stomach dropped. This was it. She was making her move. I was called into an emergency meeting at 10 a.m. Victoria was there, along with Peter Manning from HR and Jennifer Torres, Meridian's general counsel. The mood was arctic. Jessica, Jennifer began, we've discovered some very serious irregularities in our financial systems. Specifically, unauthorized access to confidential files and suspicious communications with external parties. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? She slid a printed email across the table. It showed messages from my email address to an account at Nexus Advisory Solutions, discussing payment schedules and consulting fees. The implication was clear. I was coordinating with the fake vendor. I never sent these, I said immediately. Check the headers, the metadata. We have, Jennifer interrupted. They came from your computer, your login credentials, during hours when only you were logged in. She showed me more evidence. Bank records showing a payment of $25,000 deposited into my personal account 2 months ago, supposedly from Nexus. Vendor approval forms with my digital signature on them. It was a complete frame job, sophisticated and thorough. This is insane, I said, my voice rising. I came to Victoria yesterday with concerns about these exact vendors. Now suddenly I'm the one being accused? She's setting me up. Peter from HR gave me a pitying look, like I was having a breakdown. Victoria sat perfectly still, her face arranged in an expression of disappointed concern. Jessica, she said softly, I know this must be overwhelming. I've been worried about you for weeks. The stress, the long hours. I think you may have made some poor decisions under pressure. If you cooperate with the investigation and help us understand what happened, we can potentially work out an arrangement. I didn't do anything. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly. She's embezzling from the company. I have proof.
Proof that you conveniently discovered right before we found evidence of your own involvement, Jennifer said coldly. Ms. Hartwell, you're being placed on immediate administrative leave pending the investigation. You need to surrender your badge and leave the premises. If you refuse, we'll have security escort you out. This was happening. This was actually happening. You're making a mistake, I said, looking directly at Victoria. A huge mistake. She met my eyes without flinching. I'm sorry it came to this, Jessica. I really am. Liar. I was walked out of the building like a criminal. Employees stared as I carried my personal items in a cardboard box. 3 years of work, gone in 15 minutes. When I got home, I immediately checked my personal cloud storage, where I'd backed up all my evidence. It was gone. Every file, every screenshot, every document, deleted. Someone had accessed my personal accounts and wiped everything. I felt the panic rising. Without that evidence, I had nothing. It was my word against Victoria's, and she was a respected CFO while I was an analyst being investigated for fraud. But then I remembered something Victoria didn't know about. I'd printed everything. Old-fashioned, paranoid, and completely off the digital grid. That 47-page report was sitting in a locked safe in my apartment, along with USB drives containing backups. Victoria had made her move. She'd framed me, destroyed my digital evidence, and thought she'd won. She was wrong. I spent the next 3 days in my apartment, barely sleeping, surviving on coffee and rage. First, I secured my evidence. I made multiple copies of everything, stored them in different locations, and sent encrypted copies to a lawyer I'd consulted online. I wasn't going to let Victoria delete her crimes a second time. Second, I researched. I read everything I could find about corporate fraud investigations, whistleblower protections, and legal procedures. I learned about the False Claims Act, the Sarbanes-Oxley whistleblower provisions, and the process for reporting fraud to the SEC. Third, I made a decision. I couldn't go through Meridian's internal systems. Victoria controlled those. I needed to go above her head, directly to someone who could act. Robert Chen, the CEO. But I couldn't just email him. Victoria would intercept it. I couldn't call his office. His assistant would screen me out. And I certainly couldn't show up at the building after being escorted out. I needed a different approach. I did some digging and discovered that Robert was speaking at a pharmaceutical industry conference in San Diego in 5 days. It was public information, part of a panel on rare disease research. I bought a conference pass. $500 I couldn't really afford, but it was my only shot. Those 5 days were agony. Meridian's investigation continued without me. I received a formal letter from their legal team strongly recommending I retain counsel, which made it clear they were planning to pursue criminal charges. Victoria was tightening the noose, probably thinking I was panicking, that I'd break down and confess to crimes I didn't commit. She didn't know I was planning my counterattack. The conference was at a massive hotel in San Diego. Hundreds of pharmaceutical executives, researchers, and analysts, networking and attending panels. I felt like I was going to throw up as I walked through the lobby. Robert's panel was on the second day, at 2 p.m. Innovation in Rare Disease Treatment Challenges and Opportunities. I sat in the back row, my folder of evidence clutched in my lap, watching him on stage discussing Meridian's drug pipeline. He looked tired, stressed. I wondered if Victoria's fraud was already causing problems he didn't understand yet. Budget shortfalls, investor questions, regulatory concerns. When the panel ended, I waited while people swarmed Robert with questions and business cards. I hung back until the crowd thinned, my heart hammering. Finally, I approached. Mr. Chen, I'm Jessica Hartwell. I need 5 minutes of your time. It's about Victoria Ashford and financial fraud at Meridian. His face went through several expressions: confusion, recognition, concern. "Ms. Hartwell, you're the analyst being investigated for crimes Victoria committed. Please, 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." He looked at his watch, then at my face. Whatever he saw there must have convinced him. "The coffee shop. Downstairs. 10 minutes.
I was already at a corner table when Robert arrived, accompanied by his executive assistant, who positioned herself nearby. Protection, I assumed, in case I was unstable. "You have 5 minutes," Robert said, sitting down. "Make them count." I opened my folder and slid the first page across. Victoria Ashford has been embezzling from Meridian for at least 15 months through fake consulting companies. This is a list of the shell corporations, the payments made to each, and documentation showing she owns or controls them. Robert's eyes widened as he scanned the page. These are significant amounts. $12.7 million total, probably more if you go back further. I showed him the next document. Here's the Delaware Incorporation filing showing Victoria as the registered member of Nexus Advisory Solutions. And here's our internal invoice approvals showing she personally approved every payment to that company. I continued laying out the evidence, page by page, the patterns, the timing, the shell companies, the fake invoices. Robert's face grew progressively more serious. "Why didn't you bring this through proper channels?" he asked. "Why come to me at a conference instead of reporting it to our audit committee or legal team?" "Because when I brought it to Victoria, she framed me. Within 24 hours, I was being investigated for the exact fraud she's committing. Someone accessed my computer and created fake emails making it look like I coordinated with these vendors. Someone deposited money in my account to make it look like I was taking kickbacks. Someone deleted all my digital evidence." I showed him the suspicious evidence Victoria had manufactured against me. "This is sophisticated, but here's the thing. She got sloppy with the metadata. Look at these email headers. The messages supposedly from me to Nexus, they were created in bulk at 2:47 a.m. on Tuesday morning. I wasn't even logged into the network, but Victoria's administrator account was." Robert's jaw clenched. "She used her admin access to fake communications from your account?" "Yes. And the $25,000 supposedly paid to me? The routing number traces back to a bank that services several of her shell companies. She paid herself, then moved money into my account to frame me." I could see the wheels turning in Robert's head, the horrifying realization of what had been happening under his watch. "Mr. Chen, Victoria is very smart. She's had years to build this scheme, but she made one critical mistake. She thought I'd be too scared or too destroyed to fight back. She thought wrong." Robert was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents. "This is explosive, Miss Hartwell. If you're right, this is securities fraud, embezzlement, possibly RICO violations. But if you're wrong, if this is somehow a misunderstanding, or if you're trying to deflect from your own misconduct, then prosecute me," I said firmly. "Bring in the FBI, hire a forensic accounting firm, investigate everything, because the evidence will prove I'm telling the truth. The question is whether you want to know the truth or whether you want to protect your CFO." That hit home. Robert's expression hardened. "I want the truth. Always." He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Phil, it's Robert. I need you on the first flight to San Diego. No, right now. We have a situation that can't wait." Phil, I would learn, was Philip Ramirez, Meridian's outside counsel from a major law firm. He arrived 4 hours later, and we reconvened in a conference room Robert had rented at the hotel. For the next 6 hours, I walked them through everything. Every shell company, every payment, every piece of evidence. Phil asked sharp questions, poking at inconsistencies, testing my story. But the evidence held up, because it was true.
"This is actionable," Phil said. "Robert, we need to act immediately. If Victoria suspects we're investigating, she'll destroy evidence and potentially flee." Robert looked like he'd aged 10 years. "What's the play?" "We need to secure all financial records tonight. I'll get a forensic accounting team mobilized. We need to restrict Victoria's access to company systems without alerting her. And we need to contact the SEC and potentially the FBI." He looked at me. "Miss Hartwell, you understand you'll need to cooperate fully with the investigation. You'll likely need to testify, possibly in criminal proceedings." "I understand. You'll also need protection. If Victoria realizes what's happening, she might take action against you." That thought hadn't occurred to me. What kind of action? "The kind that desperate people take when they're facing federal prison," Phil said grimly. Robert made a decision. "Jessica. Can I call you Jessica? As of right now, you're being reinstated as an employee and placed under company protection. We're putting you in a hotel under a company account with security. You don't go home until this is resolved." "What about Victoria?" "Tomorrow morning, she's going to receive a very surprising phone call."
The next morning, Victoria Ashford walked into what she thought was a routine executive meeting. Instead, she found Robert Chen, Philip Ramirez, 2 partners from the forensic accounting firm, and 2 FBI agents. I wasn't there. I was in a hotel room with a security guard outside my door, watching the stock market and news feeds. But Phil told me everything later. "Victoria," Robert had started, "we need to discuss Nexus Advisory Solutions and several other consulting vendors." Phil said her face went perfectly blank. Pure survival instinct. Show nothing, admit nothing. "Of course," she'd replied smoothly. "What would you like to know?" "We'd like to know why you've been embezzling from the company through shell corporations you own." The silence that followed was apparently excruciating. Victoria looked at each person in the room, calculating her options. She tried denying it, then she tried the tax optimization story she'd given me, then she tried blaming rogue vendors. But when they showed her the evidence, the incorporation documents, the bank records, the forensic analysis of the fake emails she'd created in my name, she finally went silent. "Ms. Ashford," one of the FBI agents said, "you have the right to remain silent." They read her rights while she sat frozen in her chair. She was arrested that afternoon, handcuffed and walked out of the Meridian building by federal agents while employees watched in shock. The news broke within hours. CFO of Meridian Pharmaceuticals arrested for $12.7 million embezzlement scheme. The media went crazy. Tech and business outlets ran deep dives on the fraud. Reporters dug into Victoria's background, finding hints of smaller financial irregularities at previous companies. The house of cards that was her reputation collapsed completely. Meridian's stock dropped 11% on the news, before recovering slightly when Robert announced they'd recovered most of the stolen funds and had strengthened internal controls. The forensic investigation ultimately revealed Victoria had stolen $14.2 million over 18 months. She'd used the money to fund a lavish lifestyle, a second home in Aspen, a collection of luxury cars, private school tuition for her kids, and investments in real estate. All of it bought with stolen money. She was charged with wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. The prosecution had overwhelming evidence. The shell companies, the bank records, the forged emails, everything. Victoria's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutors weren't interested. This case was too high profile, and Victoria had tried to frame an innocent employee. They wanted the maximum sentence. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for 2 days, walking the jury through how I'd discovered the fraud and what Victoria had done to frame me. Her defense was weak, claims that she'd been trying to create legitimate consulting businesses, and that the bookkeeping got confused, that I'd misunderstood her intentions, that she was a victim of an overzealous prosecution. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty, on all counts.
Victoria Ashford was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $14.2 million in restitution plus penalties. Her assets were seized, the houses, the cars, the investments, everything. The powerful CEO who thought she was untouchable ended up in an orange jumpsuit.
As for me, the aftermath was complicated. Meridian immediately cleared me of all accusations. They issued a public statement praising my diligence and courage in exposing corporate malfeasance. The investigation against me was closed, and all the fake evidence Victoria had planted was documented as part of her obstruction charges. Robert Chen called me personally. "Jessica, I owe you an apology, and the company owes you more than that. You saved us from something that could have destroyed Meridian." He offered me Victoria's old position, Chief Financial Officer. I was 30 years old, a CFO of a $12 billion company. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of, accelerated by years. But I surprised myself by saying no. "I appreciate it, Robert, really, but I need some time. What happened with Victoria, it broke something. My trust, my sense of security. I need to step back and figure out who I am outside of this company." He understood. Instead, he offered me a consulting contract. Essentially, I'd come back when I was ready and help rebuild the finance department with stronger controls and oversight. I took 6 months off. I went to therapy, I spent time with my family, I traveled. I processed the trauma of being betrayed by someone I admired and trusted, of being framed for crimes I didn't commit, of my entire life nearly destroyed. Slowly, I healed. When I did return to Meridian, it was as a consultant, specializing in financial oversight and fraud prevention. I helped implement new systems to prevent what Victoria had done. I trained analysts to recognize red flags. I created a culture where questioning authority wasn't just accepted, it was encouraged. And eventually, I started my own firm, Hartwell Integrity Solutions. We specialize in helping companies detect and prevent executive fraud. My experience with Victoria became my expertise. Turns out there's a huge market for someone who knows how financial predators think and operate. My firm now has 20 employees and clients across multiple industries. We've helped uncover 4 other major fraud schemes, recovering over $80 million for our clients. I've been featured in Fortune magazine, appeared on financial news shows, and spoken at conferences about corporate fraud prevention. The analyst who was almost destroyed for telling the truth became one of the most respected voices in corporate integrity. As for Victoria, she's currently in year 2 of her 12-year sentence. I heard she tried to appeal, claiming her trial was unfair. The appeal was denied. Sometimes I think about her, the woman who mentored me, who taught me, who I admired. I wonder how long she'd been stealing before I caught her. I wonder if she ever felt guilty. Mostly, though, I just feel sad. Sad that someone so talented chose fraud over integrity. Sad that she threw away everything for money she didn't even need. And grateful. Grateful that I found the courage to stand up to her, even when it cost me everything. Because in the end, it gave me something better. So, what did I learn from all of this? What should you take away if you ever find yourself in a similar situation? First, trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Don't ignore red flags just because they're inconvenient or because you want to believe the best in people. Second, document everything. The moment I started suspecting fraud, I began keeping records. Those records saved my career and put Victoria in prison. In any workplace situation where something seems off, create a paper trail. Third, protect your evidence. Victoria deleted my digital files, but she couldn't touch my printed documents and offline backups. In the age of cloud storage, remember that everything connected to the internet can be accessed or deleted by someone with enough access and motivation. Going through proper channels doesn't always work when the person you're reporting is the one who controls those channels. Sometimes you have to go around the system to get justice. Fifth,
The truth is powerful, but it needs to be backed by evidence. I couldn't just accuse Victoria of fraud. I needed proof. Detailed, irrefutable, documented proof. And finally, standing up for what's right is terrifying and comes with real costs. I lost my job, my sense of security, and nearly lost my career. But the alternative, staying silent while someone stole millions and got away with it, was worse. Not everyone who discovers fraud will have a happy ending. Sometimes whistleblowers get crushed by the system. Sometimes the bad guys win. But sometimes, if you're brave enough, thorough enough, and stubborn enough, justice actually happens. Victoria Ashford thought she could silence me by destroying my career. She thought fear would keep me quiet. She thought framing me would make her untouchable. She was wrong on every count. My name is Jessica Hartwell. I was almost destroyed for telling the truth. Instead, I became someone who helps others tell the truth safely. And Victoria? She's in prison, right where she belongs. If you ever find yourself facing someone powerful who's doing something wrong, remember my story. Remember that evidence matters, courage matters, and sometimes, just sometimes, David actually does beat Goliath. Just make sure you've got your documentation ready and your backups secured. Because the truth always comes out eventually. The only question is whether you'll be brave enough to help it along.